We know what some of the problems are for music institutions to educate our students to be both highly skilled and employable um, musicians, particularly in the precarious environment that we've heard about. And in Diana's own words, the fact that higher music education needs to adapt and continue to adapt by including digital literacy and futures thinking in their curriculums. So this all gels with my own experience of teaching undergrads who are just about to graduate, and that's, I guess, one of my identities. So what I'd like to do this morning for us is to start from where we are institutionally, then take the focus out wider and join it up to policy and then broader societal terms. And in the policy area particularly, that speaks to my another identity as an institutional manager and now consultant. If you're wondering what the shipping container in the wood is all about, all will be revealed later on. So first of all, the institutional foreground. I'd like to concentrate on entrepreneurial education at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, where there are a number of initiatives, as there are elsewhere. My first-hand experience, as I say, is in an elective module available to fourth-year undergraduates, and it's called The Musician as Entrepreneur, and it encourages students to think of themselves as creative entrepreneurs, not be told what to do, and it includes researching and testing a creative business idea and writing up a full business plan. It's quite hard. But some of the business ideas that students come up with clearly illustrate their plight. So last year, a classical pianist who is dismayed at coming to the end of their undergraduate career and really not knowing where to turn next, their business idea was to set up a digital help and support line for unemployed pianists. This year, we have a voice student who reports that others in her cohort are going on to master's degrees because they can't think of anything else to do. And they haven't really managed to get a sense of themselves as artists. And her idea was a counselling service. And that might be linking with a careers service too, as going back to Nicole's keynote. Now, these examples really do say something about the deficits in what we're providing. So I went back 10 years to when we had a comprehensive revamp of our undergraduate curriculum. And as part of that, we came up with some curriculum principles. This was one of them, to provide insight and experience of what's required to succeed in a diversity of artistic fields. And another one, when I managed to get my slide to go, too late, excuse me, here we go, was to enable students to make a contribution in the world as artists, educators, advocates and citizens, as we phrased it at the time. Now, these statements are now commonplace. I see them all over the place in my work as a reviewer, in the UK and Europe, further afield too. But I have my doubts as to whether these aspirations are really succeeding. At the time, 10 years ago, we had a really important presentation during our curriculum reform called Our Walls. And it was about who we show on our walls, the pictures on our walls in our institution. And in our place, we see the TV and film personalities. We see the real high-flying, glitzy performers. We don't see the community musicians. We don't see the arts workers who work with refugee communities. We don't see those transdisciplinary artists and the teachers. So I think we still have a long way to go about institutional values. Where does this all sit institutionally? Well, the musician as entrepreneur sits in a program, but for me, some of the more exciting stuff for us is sitting outside programs. And here's an example of one such initiative, and it's called Shift. And it's about shifting your way of thinking, helping emerging artists and performers to hone their professional and entrepreneurial skills. Similar in some ways to Future Makers, and I think it has links with IAA earlier as well. It looks to answer these sorts of dilemmas for students. This is some quotes from participants. The first quote, this person feeling just kind of dumped and abandoned the day they graduated. And the second quote saying the institution is so focused on producing performance, if you realise you don't actually want to do that, you don't have any, it's a struggle to find stuff, as this person said. So, the SHIFT programme in our institution sits in research and knowledge exchange, which I think is quite interesting because it's potentially a sort of third strand of activity that specialist institutions could get involved with. Knowledge exchange is defined as any action through which knowledge and research is shared between universities or conservatoires and partner organisations and turned into impact in society and the economy. Well, how does that translate for us? I recently did a large institutional audit of all the ways in which we think as an institution that we have impact in society and the economy. And I found an abundance of activity, an abundance of evidence of the RCS as a cultural institution in the heart of a kind of a cultural and artistic ecosystem. And we have real areas of strength there and emerging ones. And I think one of the emerging areas of strength is in this area of supporting graduates transitioning into the next stage of their professional lives. And that's where the link is here. So I think KE, or knowledge exchange, does link with music livelihoods and the role for institutions in preparing graduates for the reality of a probably precarious career. And it's also about making the links between higher music education and the professions and education, whatever partners, explicit in institutional terms and raising its profile. So what I think I'd like to see as three areas of supported activity for us are learning and teaching, research now, of course, and KE. And I think if KE gains a higher profile, that link between education and future livelihoods might be strengthened. Pulling it out further into broader societal terms, I've been lucky to be involved in the Association of European Conservatoires project Strengthening Music in Society, which has just finished. And in our recent papers, Helena Gaunt and I and lots of others from the SMS project argued for a fresh conceptual approach to prepare graduates for their transition into professional life. And we framed this as musicians as makers in society. And again, I'm thinking of that link with what Pam was saying about making with. As we know, the traditional emphasis in our institutions is on acquisition of craft skills, but those well-defined career paths scarcely exist anymore. So we started from the questions of how should conservatoires respond to the need for a broader range of skills? How can institutions remove barriers to access and widen participation and dissolve perceptions of elitism or music making being a marginal or luxury interest? And how can institutions be part of renewing the extraordinary potential of music making in our society? So in order to address this, we argued in this paper that there's a need for a change of paradigm and the lens through which we look at what an artist is and does, and what specialist higher ed music educations are and do. And that change in paradigm means connecting values and priorities, which have previously been shown, I think, to or perceived to conflict. So what I'm talking about there is maybe the way that artistic autonomy and craft expertise has hitherto sort of seemed to conflict with social and societal aspects of music making. And until not very long ago, there was a definite pecking order here, where the societal aspects of music making were certainly not uppermost. That is changing, though. And we argue that the reciprocity of these priorities and their interdependence is essential. We came up with this paradigm of a vision for the musician as a maker in society, which fundamentally bridges artistic and social elements. So there's three elements in this paradigm: musicians' visions and identities, musical craft and artistry, and the need and potential in society. So we try here to connect a vision of society with the musician's craft skills and artistic practice. And very much, again, a link up with what Pam was talking about earlier. It recognised that musicians must be immersed in their artistry, but it brings this into dialogue with their motivations as a human being. And that maybe goes back to those quotes from students earlier, where they felt dumped. But it also brings it into dialogue with their practical experiences of responding to needs in society and engaging with communities. And I want to end with that. Going back to the shipping container, I'd be wrong to ignore the fact that Glasgow has just hosted the COP26 conference. But I'm very pleased that my institution and the students and staff within it responded to COP through the shipping container. The shipping container became our climate cafe, where you could come in for tea and biscuits and a chat about COP, and also a climate portal, which is part of the sort of innovation community in the conservatoire, where in the climate portal you could share with musicians and artists all over the world artistic concerns, societal concerns, and climate concerns. I thought that sends a good and positive message about the artist's connection in society, and that at last an institution like us is not in a little artistic bubble, but sees it as its responsibility to do something about it. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Celia, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Oh, someone's got some...
Turn my phone off, rookie error, sorry. That's
someone was blowing a trumpet going, ta-da, this is fantastic.
Sorry.
Do you need to run off to your taxi? You might need
That's
to...
all right, he's early. So I'm saying he, it might be she, but it's for 12:30. We've got a train to catch.
Oh, excellent. Pam's got here wonderful presentation, Celia. Love your shipping container climate portal, just fabulous. Wonder what a career portal might do. So yeah, fantastic. No, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Celia from the floor at all? We've got a hand up, which is great. We've got Matt Flynn.
Hi Celia, thanks for the presentation, really interesting.
Hi.
I was just wondering, you're talking about, obviously your focus seems to be post-university, but I was just wondering if you considered, obviously from a UK context, share sort of a lot of the same concerns, although I teach more in the pop field, so there's a bit more embeddedness in terms of professionalisation within our institutions, but more concerned about actually the downstream impact of lessening amounts of GCSE and A-level music being taught and taken in schools. And in terms of equality and diversity, only really sort of privately educated musicians now being able to afford music lessons and those types of things, and the impact of that on your idea.
Yeah, I think thanks very much, Matt. I think in the sort of classical world, we have an enormous amount to learn from education in popular music, and I think I agree with you that the early education in music means that it is providing us with real problems. We have to change. I mean, this is, I think, my message is that there needs to be an absolutely radical rethinking of conservatoire education. We can't carry on like this. If we are to answer that need, which I think is manifest for widening access, we can't do it with the tiny feeders that we have at the moment. There needs to be really, really radical change. And that's what I would like to be a sort of cheerleader for, if that's possible, from the sidelines these days. But we can't stay the way we are.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, here, Celia. Pam.
Thank you so much. Really exciting. And Diana, well done to sequence like a concert today. The programming is really had a very nice kind of line of flight and connection, and that takes hours. I acknowledge that. I was serious when I said, what about a career portal? You know, a climate portal is fantastic, but what about a kind of sort of rebellious group getting together and hanging that shipping container, even if it was digitally, you know, for a radical think, thinking about hip-hopification of education. Why well, we know why conservatoires just hang on to the 19th century. Maybe they need to change the name conservatoire. But either way, a radical rethink that does actually really dismantle, indeed, and dismantle, flip, and change practice and thinking. How might that start?
Well, thank you, Pam. I love the hip-hopification of music. I think how it starts is through working in a more transdisciplinary way, and I was really struck by what you were saying about transdisciplinary education. So again, 10 years ago in our reform of the curriculum, collaboration with other disciplines was at the heart of that. Hasn't really taken off, or maybe it takes a longer time to take off. But one thing I like about Shift, and one thing I like about these institutional initiatives not being in programs, is that Shift was a collaboration with the Glasgow School of Art and with Queen Margaret University. So it had trans or interdisciplinary working built in. And I think that's the key to it, is to get musicians out of a narrow frame and widen that lens. And I love the idea of a career portal too. And I'm going to suggest that to my colleagues.
Okay, so maybe we could call them sonic architects or something, because I think that this musician name is really a lead weight that just you know, I think we've got to get a lot more disruptive.
Yeah. So excuse me, husband at the door.
Excellent. We have Lottie just asking one more question. Do you think rethinking admission barriers and gates can encourage paradigm shifts to happen?
Absolutely, Lottie. And but it's going to be really, really hard work to make those changes in the world in which we operate, which I think still values and still thinks in terms of the glitzy performing career as the main aim of conservatoire studies. No, it isn't, but I think those absolutely ingrained attitudes are going to be really, really hard to shift.
Well, how long do you reckon that would take if you had to put a timeline on that?
You know what? I was just thinking, I mean, you could have, you could, with right thinking, let's say with a group of collaborative individuals, you could do it maybe in 10 years, maybe, but probably more like 20.
Yeah.
But hey, you know, maybe we've seen how fast things change in the pandemic. Maybe we can go faster than that.